introduce our panelists, starting at the far end, Dr. Greg Chamitov, former NASA astronaut on the ISS for, I don't know, for several decades. No. You had several trips to the International Space Station. And Dr. Chamitov oversees the Astrolab at Texas A&M. And he is a founder of Space Teams, which we'll be demoing a bit later.
Okay, yeah, hello, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. A number of years, almost 20 years with NASA, and now at Texas A&M as a professor. We have a lab there called the Astrolab. Many of the folks here on the panel are some of the students and former students from that lab. And one of the things that we've been trying to do now for a number of years is essentially put the physics and the engineering into virtual reality to make essentially the universe real in virtual reality, and then enable students and engineers from around the world to collaborate and work together, collaborate online, work together in VR, test out new designs, build entire missions, look at mission sequences, evaluate them in terms of the hardware, in terms of the operations, and essentially the mission from the beginning, the vision was really enabling the world to collaborate together in space, because there's a small, essentially, community of folks who are able to do this and have access to the technology, and NASA and the other space agencies, and everyone else has great ideas. It's not so easy for them to collaborate and contribute. So this was a vision really to enable everyone to contribute to the vision for the future of humanity in space.
And to Dr. Chamitov's right is Dr. Al Bowers, former chief scientist at NASA.
Thank you, Mark. I ran the intern program out at our place, NASA Armstrong. Most of our work is atmospheric flight, system identification of the vehicles, and how do you engage young people and bring them in as a part of a team, an established team, and then make them a contributing member, and then eventually they go off and do their own thing. And I'm pretty proud of the fact of some of the places that my interns have ended up. I have an intern that worked on Cassini. I have an intern that I have 5 interns that worked on James Webb, which really surprised me, because fairly late in the game they were getting into the various places that they could go work on it. And should mention my daughter-in-law is actually one of those as well. My son and this young lady were dating, and they didn't tell my wife or I for 4 months. And so I have one of my interns is now my daughter-in-law. Pretty ridiculous. I told her she's doing a lousy job of getting rid of her last boss. But we ran about 170 interns through a particular small-scale program that we did with small UAVs at our place, remotely controlled and fully instrumented. And we were able to do system identification on the vehicle and actually show that birds actually do something quite different than the way we design aircraft. And we're actually, I hate to say it, we're getting it wrong. And I spent the last maybe 12 years trying to convince the aerospace community that there's something here, it should be examined, but no success there yet. That's okay.
And then to Al's right, we have Jenna Salerno from One Giant Leap Australia.
I'm very far away from home. It's good to be here. I'm an education liaison for One Giant Leap. So as a teacher myself, I've seen the importance of STEM education and the benefits of these programs firsthand. So we have a couple of programs. One is Seeds in Space, where we've sent seeds into space, wattle seeds, so that's the Australian national flower, and then sent them back, and we are testing them in different schools to see kind of what difference these seeds growth kind of come problems, like what will happen to the water? Will it grow the same way, or will it be affected by the radiation in space? We also have the Gadget Girls, which are a great program of get females into entrepreneurship and more STEAM-based education programs. We want to encourage and foster curiosity and critical thinking in our programs, because we really want to make sure that we have a younger generation that can really bring forth some excellent results for the future, I guess. So we're trying to make sure that these space leaders which are really armed with knowledge and understanding.
And then to Jenna's right, we have Trevor Weiner. He is a member of the Sim Dynamics team over in the Astrolab.
So, howdy, my name is Trevor. I'm a member of the VR sub-team, which means that I work on implementing controls and headsets into the simulations that the other people work on. I've been working with Dr. Chamitov for a few years. I got interested in it during college because I just saw an advertisement for it, and it worked out pretty well for me. I guess I'd say I'm mostly interested in how VR can be used for education and engineering experiences that otherwise you wouldn't really have the opportunity to do. Like, for an average person like me, I probably won't have a chance to go in space anytime soon. But just to be able to experience through a headset, or maybe even if I was a kid still in high school, I think that would be really inspiring for me to continue pursuing a career in it.
Then Waywin Lee, to Trevor's right, is also a member of the Sim Dynamics team.
All right, howdy guys. My name is Waywin Lee. I am one of the PhD students for Dr. Chamitov. I'm specialized in surface operations simulation, so how do we simulate intravehicular activity and extravehicular activity in virtual reality, and make that very useful for training simulations outside of just situations that are very nominal. So let's say there's an issue. There's an issue with one of the astronauts there. One of my visions is just to have someone to be able to slap on augmented reality, virtual reality headset, and jump in, and now we have a doctor right there on the scene helping out that astronaut that could be out on Mars or on a lunar mission for Artemis. And that's just kind of like the vision that I work in inside the virtual reality lab. Outside of that, I work down in Johnson Space Center in the Mission Control Center as one of the inside the Artemis Guidance Navigation Control team. So trying to kind of integrate my work into mission control and get that to help out flight controllers on the ground as well as astronauts and crew when we get to landing back on the moon again in a few years. So thank you.
And then to Waywin's right is Greg Chamitov. Connor is also a member of the Sim Dynamics team.
Howdy. So I am the lead software engineer on the Sim Dynamics team, and as part of that team, I've been working with the rest of the team to develop the core technologies of the software that is, as you see here, with the spacecraft platform. So that's the core of our work, where we apply it to many different disciplines in terms of STEM education, as well as professional tasks such as engineering systems, validation, and other things. I've been working with the team for about 6 years now, and doing my master's with Dr. Chamitov.
And then finally, Elise Cook. She's also with Sim Dynamics. Yes.
Hi, I've been with this group and Dr. Chamitov since about 2017, and I've hopped around different projects in our lab, from astronaut training using our virtual reality software to now focusing on space teams, which is a program that aims to bring and use virtual reality to teach STEM education through K-12 schools.
So one of the exciting things about this, as you're mentioning, on space teams, is that it combines a lot of different tools that essentially are being used for space exploration. So why don't we start with a little demo of that, and then we can kind of get into some further discussions around space and exploration tools and things like that, and where we see things evolving as we move forward into the future. Obviously, there's an awful lot of exciting things happening with the Webb telescope, and it's really kind of giving us glimpses into deeper space and to, seeing an awful lot of things that were mysterious to us and giving it a bit more, giving our life or our understanding of space a bit more structure. So, who would like to lead the demo for space teams?
Connor, you're gonna fly, right?
Yeah, I would flood. Control here.
Okay.
Well, while Connor's flying, let me just start off by kind of putting this in context. So you heard Elise mention Space Teams as an educational program. What you're looking at on the screen there is something that we're working on leading forward, where you can explore the whole solar system. You can also create entire new solar systems by putting in parameters for planets. And let's say we have data from an exoplanet, and we want to see what that planet might actually look like if you actually visited it. And so we can create that planet procedurally. We have all the data, like Mark said, from NASA, JPL, all that data, is in here that's interpolated and also extrapolated where needed. But Space Teams itself, the education component of it, is an opportunity for students to learn about spacecraft systems, design the systems, assemble them, create a ship that actually works, build habitats on other planets, try to make them sustainable so that the crew can actually live there while they're exploring. They get to do robotic exploration and human exploration, in a spacesuit, for example, and doing the operations that are part of a mission. So you're not going to see that today. We're showing you one part that is kind of leaning forward, which is to be able to travel anywhere throughout the solar system, and essentially the thing we're going to be adding to this is what we already have in Space Teams, which is the ability to build. So you can go anywhere, build anything, share it, create experiences, throughout the solar system or throughout the galaxy. So as a bit of a background, that's kind of what you're looking at and how it fits in. And I'll let other folks here kind of explain things as well.
Yeah, so right here what we have is pretty much an accurate version of what Mars would look like right now, real time. So this is our data coming in from
JPL Spice. That is the source for this. So we take their data sets and software, and we feed in the exact time, and we get an exact representation of where the planets and other celestial bodies are in the solar system here. So give you out of the frame here. We have a one-to-one solar system, in essence. You can go to Earth now.
Sorry, what's JPL Spice? Is that what you said in the data? Is that a house or a satellite?
NAF Spice is a software toolkit for using JPL's assembled data sets for planet knowledge, just location over time. Yes.
JPL is a branch of NASA, the one that does all the deep space exploration.
Okay.
Yes, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, basically, to put it in simplest terms, yeah. They're located in lovely Pasadena, California. Well, there's a little extra tidbit for you.
Yeah, we can go over to the bit here. We'll talk a little bit more about the other technology. So we take, again, it's assembled by other groups such as USGS and various universities. There are the same tools that are used for geographical information systems on Earth. We have these mapped data sets where they have exact projections of where they are located on planets, and we can take that data, run through our pre-processing algorithms that have very extremely accurate and detailed predictions of our planets down to the center here.
So one of the things is with the model we see here is we're currently working on a project that's enabling surface operations on the bottom, the south pole of the moon. And so we're trying to put in an accurate representation of an IVA, which is an intravehicular activity, and the EVA activity. And so through the lab right now, I'm working on a paper that's essentially encompassing in this very accurate model of the moon, as well as enabling people in virtual reality to come in, simulate, and test out the procedures, test out driving around the lunar rover, and see, maybe this design works, maybe this design doesn't actually work. That's kind of like the next step at least for this lunar Artemis mission here for virtual reality.
And as you guys get into that, right, it's like there's such finite detail, like you're saying, it's down to the centimeter.
Right.
And you can track atmosphere, you can track like all of the different kind of elements that would be essentially talking about a rover, if you're talking about landing, if you're talking about all of those things, it allows you to create sort of like what those conditions would be and what kind of challenges you as a pilot would have to overcome, or as an explorer, or as somebody like kind of trying to guide a rover across a planet. Like all of those things are figured into, you know, the package that you put together in tandem with JPL and NASA, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of the first work I did on the software was atmospheric modeling, because that's what I had been studying in school at Texas A&M. So what we're able to do is we feed in a lot of parameters that we're able to ascertain from a distance. Things like atmospheric composition based on percentages of different gases, how much light the planet reflects or doesn't reflect, things like that, just the size of things in the atmosphere. All those go into the algorithm and just make a pretty decent guess of what the temperature would be like in any given spot in the atmosphere.
So yeah, this has been used as an education tool, but also as a real engineering analysis platform. So, you know, you're seeing it visually, but, you know, for example, you know, we have, if it was an exoplanet, for example, and you had, you know, it was a certain distance from the sun, and the certain properties of that star, and you had a certain composition in the atmosphere, let's say methane, and you had a certain tilt axis, well, you know, if that meant that the poles should be, you know, ice, you know, methane ice, and the equator should be a methane ocean, then that's what you'll get. So the physics is all in there to do that. But also the environment of, you know, Mars' atmosphere, radiation exposure of Mars. The point is to be able to put an actual design of a spacecraft into the simulation, be able to see what the real impact is. So if you're trying to land a lander on Mars, you actually have the atmospheric properties of Mars that you're flying through, and it's an aerodynamic model, it's an atmospheric model. You're actually getting what you'd expect to get, so you can analyze whether this design is going to work well for that landing. So these are the kind of things that we've put in, but they're not completed. For example, we don't have, you know, an atmospheric model for every moon in the solar system that has an atmosphere. But the idea is anyone who uses this can go build those models and contribute to this. You know, they can collaborate together and add those models so that the whole solar system is completely, you know, accurate for whatever simulations they want.
And in addition, the users you can actually create planets themselves, so they can actually play around with the dynamics of an exoplanet and kind of speculate if this were a planet composed like, you know, really high temperatures, like what sort of, you know, what would the makeup of the planet's gases, what would the makeup of, you know, the planet's, you know, core be, and so it really kind of becomes about exploration. It's kind of interesting too, because what we've seen like in the past decade is that kind of emergence of the citizen scientist, right? That sort of popularism of folks being able, because of technology, to be able to help sort of chart exoplanets and discover more exoplanets in the universe and more galaxies. How do you see, you know, Al, this is an interesting question, because we were talking about craft and craft design, and that's something, as you were discussing, like you were basically, you were working a lot of your focus around how birds take flight and how their aerodynamics work. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that, you know, evolved some solutions on the technology side?
So when we first started putting the idea together that this was something different, I was not focused on birds at all. This is clearly a case of the person who's involved not getting it. That would be me. There were some clear indications that the model actually did fit birds very, very well. And all of a sudden we had certain people that were coming out of the biology world that were very interested. We had one particular professor who was from Bristol in the UK, one of the premier bird researchers at that time. And it turns out he was a professor at USC, University of Southern California down in LA. And so I went down and visited with him, and it was one of those moments where the engineering and the biology all come together all at the same time. And we had been able to describe some of the things that he had observed, but he was still trying to fit the old model into what his data was telling him. And it was something different.
Right.
And when all else fails, believe the data. And so being able to integrate different pieces, and in many ways that's what you're doing, is how do you integrate these pieces so that you can then do things like, you could do a full reentry on Mars. Now, there aren't too many places that you can go to right now to be able to do that kind of thing.
Right.
You have that tool. So there are a lot of things like this that you want to do a reentry on Titan. That could be done. You guys could do that. You have the tool. That's vastly helpful for what people want to try and do. And most of you are not directly associated with NASA just yet, but that doesn't preclude you from actually developing a tool that becomes useful for NASA to use. And NASA has tried to figure out how to do this with the citizen science program, and it's still very much embryonic development. Eventually that will be solved, but right now it takes people like this guy to figure all that out.
Sure. I mean, and that's interesting because as we think about toolkits, right? When we think about evolving toolkits, like what's here with the simulation program really sort of provides that sort of structure to sort of imagine where the next steps are and where things can go. And I think that anchoring things within NASA JPL's data set, working with actual propulsion systems, working with the correct engineering and mechanics and things, gives students and the community the real kind of launch pad to sort of get, in further depth to explore things even further, right? I mean, what sort of tools, like Waywin, what sort of tools do you see evolving from this? Or what other things do you think are really exceptionally helpful at this point in really kind of driving innovation in space?
Yeah, so I really see that kind of collaboration that Dr. Chamitov was talking about earlier, where anybody can add in their models into this kind of universe system. This can be running somewhere, and for some reason we don't have let's say we don't have an active model of how the reentry profiles on Titan are, or like how the atmosphere is comprised there. Well, we can get an atmospheric scientist or anybody else can just contribute into this, and that model will drive that model and that data set will be able to help somebody else who might not even touch that kind of data set or anything design a reentry, design their vehicle to sustain reentry over there. So all this kind of I think that's like just one of the many examples that I see. Operationally, I see the immediate response. I don't have to be on Mars to help someone out, right? We can send messages to them. We can jump into virtual reality and help them out. Barring that we figure out all the latency issues between here and Mars if we have somebody on Mars. But we have that capability now to tune in live, to have experts right on the scene, to have medical experts from around the world tune in, and I find this to be a tool to connect a lot of different fields together, and inside of virtual reality or augmented reality.
Thanks. And Jenna, when because you're obviously a great distance away from, the core teams at NASA and things, how do you feel what's really connective for you on the technology side? How are you feeling in Australia that you're connecting with the larger, community?
So we had a group of space teams in, I believe in Melbourne, so it was just a bit south of Sydney. So we had a couple of people in there who were working real time with other students in America and students in the UK and students in Dubai, and who were all collaborating and working together to create different planets, different things. And it was just really interesting to see different students of different ethnicities and places just kind of communicating together and creating something that they never could ever kind of imagine they could ever create with this kind of software. So it's really amazing kind of seeing how, even like a 15-year-old has some really excellent thought processes happening, and this can be kind of nurtured through, the development of programs like this.
It's interesting because space, the idea of the industry of space seems to make one singular community out of the globe, right? And because I know, Dr. Chamitov, you've spoken before about when you were on the ISS, the number of experiments that you would be doing over the course of a day, and how many different countries you were connecting with that had different, things happening on the space station that you were essentially taking part in and helping them actualize.
Yeah, I mean, also I spent, probably the connection to Jenna comes from time that I spent in Australia as a professor down there. And one of the things that, I really kind of hit home is just that, we're really close to NASA, right? You and I, anyway. And now, and Waywin is working there, and Elise is working at a company nearby. So, we're close to NASA. But there's people with great ideas all around the world, really smart people. And they don't have, they can work on this great idea and then it doesn't go anywhere because it's just not connected to the sort of the system, Maybe, where your European Space Agency and NASA and there are a few other places, things can propagate. But the possibility of just collaboration on a worldwide scale in a system where, kind of getting back to the models here, somebody can, create a better radiation model for what's going to happen to a rover, let's say near Jupiter, where there's some radiation to worry about. And someone else can design that rover. They don't know much about radiation. That's not their expertise, but they can stick their rover on Io and drive it around and encounter that radiation model that someone else built in Australia or somewhere else, and figure out how well their rover is going to work in that environment. And then someone else will come along and improve that radiation model, and it's with some more data that they discover. So in this worldwide collaboration, this citizen science, possibility. This is the kind of tool I think that you need in order to be able to bring people together that way.
And Elise, wouldn't you say like that? The cool thing about like collaborative teams is that it brings different sort of skill sets together, right? So you don't necessarily have to be an engineer to participate and really feel connected and help innovate.
Yeah, definitely. At our team back at the lab, we have a very diverse set of different majors and backgrounds and interests, and all of it comes together to kind of create this diverse platform.
Yeah, you've got designers, you've got different folks that are actualizing, even just sort of building out concepts and really working with the team to visualize things that are being expressed. Now, Al, for you, like you were just mentioning, you had so many different interns that have gone through and essentially go off into different areas, based on, their interests. How have you seen things expand, on the possibility side in space?
So for me, it's been very surprising. I first came to NASA as an intern in 1982, and I retired in 2018, so about 37 years. From one end to the other. And we had the internet, but it was very clumsy. And I remember my first email account, 1986. And there were only about 20,000 email accounts in the world at that time. And how things have just blossomed since then and gone so many different ways, things that no one anticipated. Sure, there were futurists that were thinking about some of those things, but the way it actually developed is fascinating to look back on. And so just the way that all the pieces come together, it's fascinating to me to look at something in the way it's been put together. Just this tool alone is going to bring in a lot of people and connect a lot of people in ways that you couldn't anticipate. We had a program at our place where we were trying to figure out aerogravity assist. So you're all familiar with the idea of gravity assist in order to use the gravitational attraction of a planet in order to swing a spacecraft to a higher energy state. Well, it's possible if you have a vehicle that is shaped more like an airplane to use the very tenuous upper parts of the atmosphere of the inner planets, and you actually use the atmosphere to create that bending angle. And one of the people who invented this idea was at JPL. And we were flying wave riders at our place. And that was how he got interested. And he came to us and he presented this idea. And I remember thinking, aerogravity assist, that's not going to work. I mean, there's too much drag. And as soon as he got up and he laid all the equations up on the page, started showing the graphs, he was like, this is the greatest idea. And we got engaged and we actually built a real-time simulation. We had several of our test pilots go through and fly some of these profiles. And it was really astounding. So, and suddenly this kind of a tool makes those sorts of, how do you plan that entire mission? How do you put all that together? We didn't have that ability with our tools that we had. Greg, you've now got that.
Yeah, let me add something, because I want to bring in the education connection to that, because you mentioned gravity assist. So, one of the things that we've been doing, we just ran a program a couple weeks ago for kids. There turned out to be 169 kids around the world, 11 countries that participated in it. And they were learning about space. And these kids are ages 12 to 17. And they were doing not gravity assist, but orbital mechanics. And orbital mechanics is a senior level college class. It's not, I teach that class, and some of these guys, they've all taken it. But we're doing it graphically, doing it in a world like this. You can actually teach younger kids about these ideas, these great ideas. A seventh grader can think about how to fling themselves around the planet to get to another one, and they can stretch the orbits and visually try to figure out how to make it work without doing any math, and then get the whole idea. And so this is kind of the fun thing, is getting kids excited about space, about technology, STEM, all STEM subjects. So not only reaching, not only collaboration, but also education. This is a real powerful thing that we can do now.
It's interesting because it is like you could take the term gamification and say that it's gamifying, it's crossing over a bit into the concepts of gamification. What are your thoughts on that, like Connor?
Yes, so the students really get a lot of their enthusiasm from the competitive aspect of this, where they're on teams and they're able to take their scores and compare them against everybody else's scores in this competition. And then they're motivated to learn all the fundamentals to make their design 1% better. So that really drives forward the levels of enthusiasm on this program. They don't see with lots of things that might just be, say, written content.
I think just framing a little bit better on those mission sort of challenges that they're discussing, like one of the structure pieces I think that's really cool is that for each of the simulations that's introduced at what would you say, like astronauts in training connect with, are introduced by a space professional, whether it's an astronaut, whether it's somebody at JPL, whether it's somebody at NASA. In some cases, they're actually outside entities, like Mars City Design, folks like that. And I think what we're seeing is such an expansion into industry, right? There's like Bigelow Aerospace that's really working around becoming like the trading post in space in years to come. You've got, obviously like, Bezos, and you've got, Elon Musk, as innovators and pushing opportunities about recyclable space materials and things like that forward. But what's kind of interesting too is what inspired some of these things. Let's cross it over to pop culture for a moment. We see like what sort of inspirations, Al, what sort of inspirations do you guys see like in pop culture that sort of have become drivers for innovation? Space exploration is sort of a great sort of frontier to discuss if we want to talk about it in that way. What are some things that come to mind, from the science fiction side, or pop culture side, that inspired innovation in space?
Well, I remember the opening to 2001 when the movie first came out. And people really didn't know what it would look like when astronauts would actually walk on the moon at that time. And so, just a few years later, of course, we knew what that looked like. And once you see something, once you see the solution to a particular problem, you can't unsee that. It's something you can't let go of. And engineers are just like all of you. Once we see a problem, it's solved this way, and we want to solve it exactly that same way every time. And that's not the right approach in a lot of cases. So how do you do that? How do you drag people along? And science fiction is one of the ways you can do that. I remember when Martian first came, my wife hates it when The Martian comes on TV because I have to watch it again, and I mean, just over and over, and there's so much, I don't know about your experience, but I mean, I can remember thinking, when I was a supervisor, I have to go talk to my people, and you do realize I'm your boss, right? I mean, I actually said that. You have a crew of people that are just unbelievably brilliant. And they have some great ideas, if only, the supervisor would listen. And sometimes that's hard, because how do you're trying to steer the ship. And some of these ideas are very disruptive. And so you actually have to do a really big reset. University system, you can get away with a lot. NASA, not so much. It's a difficult problem. So how do you change those models? How do you do that? I don't think there's any good answers.
Sure.
I've got a question about 2001. How many of you have seen 2001? Okay. How many have seen 2010? Okay, so you'll appreciate this. So I was on the space station with two Russian cosmonauts for most of 6 months. They had never seen 2001, they had never seen Star Trek, and they had never seen Star Wars. So my mission was to educate these guys. And it started with 2001. And if you remember the story, right? I mean, in 2010, we got to get back out to the Discovery ship. And, but there's no U.S. ship to get there, so they had to fly on the Russian ship, right? And they're together on the Russian ship, and then they get out there and all hell breaks loose on Earth, and, and now, it's a sign of the times. And then, they're told, okay, you have to go back on your own ship, and you can't work together, right? So I was just waiting for that moment in the movie, because I was floating in the U.S. laboratory with two Russians beside me. We're on a space station together. It was unbelievable. And I was just waiting for that moment. And as soon as they said, you guys have to split up, you guys get back on your own side. But they loved it. They loved that. And one of the crewmates started watching Star Trek, and he brought it home to their kids. I actually bought him the whole series, and I shipped it over to him, and his kids loved it. And so these are so inspirational, these things. And so one thing we did after watching it in space, I would never have thought of it, but watching 2001 in space, we saw so many things that were parallel to what we were doing. They're different but parallel, like the jogging scene around the circumference. Well, here's how we jog, it was 2001. We were doing this in 2008. I was like, what, and they were envisioning this in 1968. So how did we compare? And there were so many things that were really similar and and a little bit different, but we had them and we did them. And it was really an amazing prediction of the future, that movie. I wish I could show you. Actually, that movie, I have a clip of. We produced our own movie on this after that. Basically, when we showed scenes from 2001 and then the same scene on the space station, back and forth and back and forth. And it's on the web. If you look up my name and YouTube, you'll find it there. So it's only 8 minutes long, but it's really fun. Sorry for that.
No. in space, and what are our expectations around that? I had to throw it out because I knew Jenna wanted to answer this question. But it's, it's an interesting question, right? Because there is probably alien life already on Earth, right? And so what are our thoughts as we traverse deeper into space with both, deep space telescopes and our own explorations?
So if anything, we bring up here the famous quote on space, the final frontier. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at a frontier, that's kind of like the end of something, or like getting to the first reaches of it. Rather than thinking of getting to like the end of space, it feels like space is endless. So there will never be a final frontier because it will just keep expanding and growing. So thinking of it as a wall or a place, I always had this like imaginary thought that like space would just keep going and then there would just be a brick wall. It would just stop. It would just be a brick wall, or the universe of what's it, the Hitchhiker's that one? There's a restaurant at the end of the universe. So if you get there, that's it. That's where the end is. It's right here. But because space is expanding, you never know. You could just keep going on and on forever, and that's kind of a very wild and incredible way to think of what is out there. Because with these, with the gentler telescope and also the I believe the Event Horizon telescope as well to the influence of black holes, we're seeing greater, and more high definition images of galaxies that we didn't even know existed. Now we can see them in a higher detail, and that's pretty incredible way to think of what is
Yes, Al?
So one of the last things that happened right before COVID shut everything down, I got to go steep the Kip's Farm. If you know that name, Nobel Prize in 2017, gravity, black holes colliding, the neutron stars colliding, and gravitational lensing. And now we see these images coming back from Webb, and every single image that they're going to get with Webb is a deep field. We are going to see more gravitational lensing than you're going to know what to do with. And people are going to have a really hard time trying to, it's called deconvolute those images to figure out what is that thing that's on the other side. You've got the tool, man.
Why not? Well, I got a question for you, by the way. So I'm afraid to jump into this question of whether there's life. I was the whole time I was up there, I was hoping somebody would knock on the door. And I was like thinking, what hand signals can I come up with to tell them which way to get in? I couldn't figure out how I would do it, but I hoped somebody would knock, but they never did. But I was just thinking about exoplanets, and I don't know if you guys have seen this on there's a documentary out there. I don't know if it's hard to find, but it's about life on potential life in exoplanets, and it shows all these different, based on the different gravity and different conditions and different atmosphere, what would life look like on that exoplanet? And they did, and they spent a lot of time figuring out there's all kinds of interesting birds, and what would a bird look like that could fly in a totally different environment like that? It's pretty interesting documentary if you can find it.
We have a little bit of time left. It'd be great to get a couple of questions before. So yes,
Two quick things. My wife took me to see 2001 70 millimeter for my birthday a couple of years ago. So if you guys love the movie, definitely see it on big screen. I just want to say thank you for reinstilling my faith in virtual reality, because I kind of poo-pooed it with the metaverse, thinking it was kind of a waste of time. So knowing it's actually being put to a practical use is pretty exciting. So my real question, I don't know who's going to field it, is seeing the moon and going through it. If we had this information back in '69, do you guys think we would have done the lunar landings in a different part of the moon, or did we already have enough information to know where to go and to safely explore and everything?
Right. Well, the Apollo 11 landing was sea of tranquility. That was particularly low risk, so it's probably the same destination there, same sort of terrain. Well, they didn't have the level of data. They had I forget the name of the missions, but they had enough data to know at least a little bit of information about the roughness of various parts. So it'll probably have definitely affected like the whole scientific process of finding out where is best to go. And of course, it'll go with maybe the simulators a lot better too.
And I think like, just like speaking on some of the science, you know, when they got down there, they were just like picking up different rocks or something like that they could see that it was interesting. But like having this data ahead of time, you'd be able to plan that out. Where am I going to collect regoliths? Where am I going to collect certain samples or something like that? That will give us more valuable science. Because I mean, we have in the rock lab over at JSC, I mean, we just have like little tiny samples here and there and stuff like that. And, you know, we might not have all the data that we want or need. We definitely don't for even the moon. And so with this kind of tool back in the 60s, I think that it would be just so much more speed up the scientific process so much more.
One question there, yeah.
So my questions are twofold. Apologies. So firstly, one is about the simulation itself, and one is about simulation accessibility. So the first is, how are you guys simulating orbits? Are you just taking orbital data and just extrapolating, okay, this is where it'll be in the future, as far as we know, unless something happened, which would be absurd. I assume it's that or n-body physics, which is just hell to code. And the second thing is like is this like accessible for like everyone, or is it just for like organizations? And like, where can I find it as like a student in high school?
Right, answering the Orbis question, so we have SPICE, that group distributes some data that's pre-computed for like about 100 years or so, for like before and after current time. And then we also have tools that use various methods to propagate planet orbits along physical physics. And then let's take the question.
Yeah, in terms of availability. So actually, you know, our PropSops tool can be, anybody can access that right now. So we're trying to make this available open, not necessarily free, but open, but anybody can access it. Right now, it's kind of set up in a competition, so it's accessible, like for the competitions. But we're just on the verge of putting it out there kind of permanently. There'll be a subscription kind of model to use it. The tool that we have now is really the thing that the students, you know, learn with. But we're working now on a development tool. It's not going to take us too much, maybe by December, something like that, where you can build things, you can travel around the solar system, you can build things and run a whole simulation of a mission, and do that all yourself. So that'll be available fairly soon.
If you, I was going to say, you can go to www.space-teams.com and you can check in on those kind of things, because there'll be more opportunities for folks to utilize data sets, utilize simulations, and there'll be missions launching as we continue, throughout the year. I just want to thank the panel for being so exceptional and so refined and so focused, and giving such an expansive viewpoint. And I want to thank all of you